Tequila to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. Time to talk about some of those schedule moves that are happening, some of the leaks that are coming out, letting us know who the 49ers are going to be playing, maybe a little information about joint practices, but also some signings coming down the way as well. San Francisco 49ers not resting on their laurels, but going out and getting players and bringing in players that could potentially help this roster. It's always an interesting time of year. You start getting into rookie mini camps, and then pretty soon you're heading into OTAs, and you get some real evaluation on the field. And you're always hoping that the players that you bring in are going to be able to help your football team be better than it was the year before. And with that comes, of course, a couple of guys that are going to be waived. So there's movement by the San Francisco 49ers roster-wise, but then also there's big news about the schedule. And we all know the schedule release is supposed to happen tomorrow, Wednesday. That's when you're going to get all the games. We're going to know exactly who the 49ers play, when and where, how many primetime games that are going to happen. But the NFL has started doing something a little bit different. They've allowed networks to release some games, especially the first game of the season, and maybe start leaking some down the road a little bit to get interest and intrigue going for their schedule release. So we're going to find out in just due time how many primetime games and who exactly the 49ers play when, how much travel they're going to have to deal with as far as back-to-back travel and things like that. But this is going to be a fun episode because we're going to talk about these players that the 49ers brought in, and then we're also going to talk about the schedule and then a front office move that the 49ers made official. So 49ers are busy, and it's interesting that it's busy because when you get to the end of May, June time, it slowly starts dying down especially once you get past June and you get through mandatory minicamp, then 49ers are on hiatus. But things definitely happen in this day, and I'm sure there's going to be more coming throughout the week. So it's going to be a fun one. Thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate it. Like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Really appreciate that. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe, please give it a 5-star rating. And if you're going to bet with Bet Online. Bet Online is your number one source for all your summer sports this season. From MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. So, like I said, I want to go into the signings first because I think there is some significance to the signings for the San Francisco 49ers. And I know they're depth signings, but when you bring in a guy that has the veteran experience of Chris Hubbard, it gets your mind rolling about how the 49ers feel about this team. And then you can start talking a little bit about the depth because I think he adds significant depth to the tackle position. So for those that haven't heard yet, the San Francisco 49ers signed 2 players. Yesterday, it was thought that the 49ers were going to sign defensive lineman Shakel Brown. They made that official today. And they signed offensive lineman Chris Hubbard, who has logged over 50 starts in this NFL career. He's been in the league for a long time, 33 years old. So we're getting into these guys and the significance of the signing. But it was an interesting move for the 49ers going out and getting a guy like Hubbard that can help this football team. So Hubbard is 6'4", 295 pounds. He originally came into the league as an undrafted free agent in 2013, signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. In his 10-year career with Pittsburgh, he was there from 2014 to 2017, Cleveland for four seasons from 2018 to 2022, and then with the Tennessee Titans and ran Carthon last year, so a familiar name for the 49ers. He's appeared in 94 games, 58 starts, as well as 6 postseason contests in 2023. He started 9 games with the Titans along the offensive line. And the reason that he stopped, starting for the Tennessee Titans last year was he dealt with a little bit of an injury. So Hubbard signs a 1-year deal worth $1.375 million, according to In Rappaport, and then confirmed by the team. Of course, financials not confirmed by the team, but the roster length and the fact that he is signed is on target. He had 9 starts last year for the Titans. He allowed 4 sacks and 18 pressures. He had a 95.9 pass blocking efficiency. So you talk about proficiency in pass blocking, he handles it. Now, he is undersized. We talked about his size, and he's not exactly the biggest guy. 6'4", 295, doesn't have the huge arm length. I did go watch some film of him. I got to make sure I'm prepared. And he did look like he at times struggled to anchor. He dealt sometimes like he looked like he struggled a little bit when it came to dealing with length. Those are always concerns, but he's been a guy that's been able to play a lot in this league and has been able to play all 5 positions. He has 5 position versatility. Tell me you've heard that before. This is what the 49ers do, the type of players that the 49ers really like to go with. So he's a good player. He came out of UAB, and he's been a guy that, has done some things. So also this right here from Rich Madrid, he posted this on Twitter, a 3.4% blown block rate on 289 passing snaps. That number rises to 4.9%, or 7 blown blocks in 144 snaps in true pass sets. So 11 pressures in true pass sets. For comparison, at right tackle, Colt McKivitz had a 6.5% blown rate and a 10.4% in true pass sets. So from a 4.9% to a 10.4%. Now, McKivitz, a larger sample size playing the entire season. So that's always something to remember. Also something to remember, you're dealing with a guy when it comes to Hubbard that has played a lot of games in his career. He started 58 games and played over 90 over a 10-year career. Colton McKivitz was first year starting. So that just gives you a little bit of comparison and depth, but they're adding a player that can definitely help this roster. And I think that's exactly what the 49ers are looking for consistently, is guys that can help this roster. And we know that they had to make sure they were getting better on the offensive line. And when you bring in a veteran player that can do it, a la the way they did with John Feliciano last year, I think you start feeling a little bit more comfortable with your position, knowing that you don't have to count on young guys, because the 49ers went out and they got a lot of young guys. But making sure you have veterans as well is going to be very, very important for this team. So it was a huge move by the 49ers going out and getting a guy that they can add to the tackle room. And you got to make sure you consistently add guys to every single room. And offensive line has definitely been one of the ones where we know we've seen the 49ers need to make sure they go ahead and add, because that was a big concern going into the offseason and then going through the draft, was the fact you had to make sure the offensive line got better. So with that signing and Chris Hubbard coming in, the 49ers did have to make some moves. Of course, we're going to talk a little bit about Shakel Brown as well. But this kind of puts some thought process on a guy like Brandon Parker, who they brought in from the Raiders. They signed him. A lot of people thought he was going to be the Matt Pryor type player because of his size, and he just fit Pryor's build and the way they used him as a backup guy who could maybe play tackle. Now he moves down the bench a little bit as you see Chris Hubbard come in to compete with Colton McKivitz and push McKivitz to get better. I do think you'll hear Chris Foerster and the rest of the 49ers coaching staff continue to say Colton McKivitz is a starter. But Hubbard, just like the way that it happened with John Feliciano last year, is coming in as a veteran that's logged a lot of snaps, who understands what it means to play football in this league and has the build and ability to play within this system. So if Colton McKivitz struggles or gets injured or slips up, something happens, Chris Hubbard could step in and give the 49ers significant snaps. Now, I don't want to act like he's going to be able to be as good as John Feliciano was last year, but it does mean that you have a guy now that's at least capable. And I think you always want to make sure you're better. Now, Jalen Moore, and the question of Jalen Moore gets interesting, because you could also have Hubbard competing with Jalen Moore for the swing tackle position. Chris Foerster's talked pretty glowingly about Jalen Moore during the offseason, but You bring in a veteran that's 33 years old and you pay him over $1 million, and you got to think he's got a real good opportunity to make this team. So that was very interesting. And on the offensive line, the corresponding move was the San Francisco 49ers cut Corey Luciano, a center that they had on the roster as far as on the practice squad last year. He was elevated for 2 games last season. He did not actually get in the game as far as taking offensive snaps, but Corey Luciano is the one that's cut. And that was interesting because we had talked about on the Red and Bold show last week with Mark, the fact that I thought it was going to be tough for Drake Nugent to have a chance to make this team because he was a center, even though he was at Michigan, started all those games. He was a guy that they had to feel confident could handle the position, and it was going to be tough because there were so many guys ahead of him, right? Bryson Mays, he's ahead of him, potentially Ben Barch, Corey Luciano. Well, now Luciano's out of the picture, which means more opportunities for Drake Nugent, Bryson Mays, and Ben Barch to get reps at center and potentially win over a roster spot. So this could be the reason they felt comfortable moving on from Luciano was they felt comfortable with Mays. They felt comfortable with Nugent about potentially developing into a better prospect than Luciano. So that's good news for the San Francisco 49ers because ultimately they had to make sure they went out and did that. Now, the other signing is also in the trenches is a defensive lineman. Shakel Brown is a guy they brought in. He was with the Tennessee Titans. So he's 6'3", 295, 49ers build. Lately, they've been going with guys 6', 6'1", but 6'3", 295. He's a good mover. He signed last year with the Tennessee Titans, and that was on May 12th of 2023. 49ers definitely wanted him, but they could not get a hold of him. And how do we know that we want him? Well, last year, Steph Sanchez was all over it, and she said that the San Francisco 49ers had met with Troy defensive tackle Shakel Brown in one of their 30 visits. Of course, he didn't get drafted, and he chose to go to the Tennessee Titans. So the 49ers missed out on potentially getting Shakel Brown. But then the Titans on May 7th, that's just last week, decided they were going to release Shakel Brown and make him available. He's only 25 years old, and he played at Troy for 3 seasons. He appeared in 29 games, 17 starts. He had 58 tackles and 4.5 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries, and he is a guy that's a quick mover. There was a very limited film of him. He was invited to 49ers rookie minicamp. He showed up, very limited film of seeing what he could do, but you could see the body type. I mean, he's definitely locked and loaded, big physical guy who showcases a little bit of athleticism, but some strength as well. Last year, he did deal with an ankle injury that put him on the injured reserve, and he did not help the Tennessee Titans out at all. So you got a guy now that the 49ers believe they can bring in and add to that defensive tackle depth chart. And there's some good players over there. But the 49ers knew they needed to continue to get better, and they're probably higher on him than they were the player that they released. They released Ernest Brown IV. He was originally with the Los Angeles Rams, but the 49ers decided that Shakel Brown was a better prospect right now, and so they added him to the 90-man roster. So Ernest Brown gone, and Corey Luciano gone, and in come a couple of guys that are going to help this football team. Number one, Chris Hubbard looks like a very solid signing and a guy with a legitimate chance to make the 53-man roster. And then Shakel Brown, who could come in and he can push a guy like Kalia Davis. It's time. This guy is a little bit of a taller guy than Davis, but a guy with a good first step who's going to push. So this is a nice move by the San Francisco 49ers, bringing in a couple of guys. When it comes to Brown, you're completely looking at upside, hoping that he's going to be able to develop and push your back in defensive tackles. When it comes to Hubbard, this is when it gets interesting because he has a legitimate chance to make this roster. So 2 signings, 2 releases, 49ers going out there and making some moves. Now, when you look at what happened with the schedule release, the San Francisco 49ers Week 1 matchup is now known. The 49ers are going to take on the Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. That means Robert Saleh is coming to town. It's very interesting and thankful that the 49ers aren't playing on the road against the Jets because we remember 2020, and that was not a good start to the season. That was week 2, of course, when they played the Jets, and it was a bad situation for the San Francisco 49ers. But 49ers locking up with the Jets. Robert Saleh brings his upstart team led by Aaron Rodgers to town, and the 49ers get a primetime game Monday night, September 9th. Levi Stadium is going to be absolutely rocking as the San Francisco 49ers take the field and look to make some big-time things happen this season. So that is the first of many that are going to come out tomorrow. But it's an interesting way of looking how the 49ers are going to get probably scheduled out this season. Number one, the 49ers are going to have a lot of high-profile games because they are a high-profile team. Number two, this is a game that is a prime-time matchup, and last year, Aaron Rodgers got hurt in a prime-time Monday Night Football game the first week of the season. So it's got a lot of ramifications. I think the last time the 49ers played the New York Jets, it was week one a long time ago. I think it was 1998, and Garrison Hurst ran his long touchdown run in overtime to win. T.O. was down there blocking. It's pretty fun to watch. So I could have the year wrong on that, but I remember that was something that was really fun to watch. So this is going to be an interesting matchup. Of course, as we get through the preseason and as we get through training camp, we'll be able to dive into this game and some of the matchups because it's going to be fun. Brandon Ayuk versus Sauce Gardner. You got that. You got Aaron Rodgers versus Nick Sorensen's new defense and what that's going to look like. How many of the 49ers rookies are going to be stepping in and playing? It's going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be a cool matchup. Saleh versus Shanahan week one, and a good AFC East football team heading to San Francisco. The good news, 49ers aren't playing on the East Coast. The bad news is they're going to be coming on a shorter week. What will that 49ers week 2 game look like? Last year, the 49ers headed to Los Angeles for a short trip after their week 1 trip. So they're at home. Will they be at home again, or will they be on the road? I think that's going to be interesting. Now, Jordan Schultz also put this out there, and then this is his report. It hasn't been confirmed by the league yet, but it is thought that the San Francisco 49ers are going to be playing the Kansas City Chiefs at home Sunday, October 20th. So pretty close to when they played the Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season 2 years ago. Those of you who don't remember, the 49ers traded for Christian McCaffrey, and then the Chiefs came to town. It was a good game early, and then the Chiefs went absolutely ham on the 49ers defense. And after that, D'Amico Ryans and that defense changed their ways and absolutely blew up everyone almost the entire season, all the way to the NFC Championship game. So we get Aaron Rodgers and the Jets in week 1. We get Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs in week 7 in a matchup and a rematch of the Super Bowl. And we know it's not for the same type of prize that it was in February, but it could go a long ways for confidence for the 49ers and just for illustrating where they're at. And it'll get a good idea of how to play against Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, if you've made the proper adjustments that you need to make, and just make sure you're firing on all cylinders. So that's going to be a fun one, and it's going to be on Fox. It's going to be a normal start time. So for people on the West Coast, it's going to be a 1:25 start Eastern time, 4:25. It's that game of the week roster or game time, and Tom Brady is going to be calling that game. So that'll be really fun, as well as we'll get Tom Brady, former fan of the 49ers, calling a game between Patrick Mahomes and Brock Purdy. It should be a lot of fun to get the thoughts on what this schedule is going to look like tomorrow. Of course, I'm going to be doing the Red and Bold show tomorrow with Mark as well. There could be some more things out there. So if you want to watch live, head on over to YouTube tomorrow at 2 p.m. Pacific time to watch the Red and Bold show live. You can participate. Go ahead and you can send in comments, and we'll get to those. And of course, just like always, if you super chat, then we make sure we get to those. So that's always available. But also, the schedule release is going to come out, and then we're going to have a really good idea of when and where. So it'll be a lot of dissecting the 49ers schedule and how exactly their schedule looks like this season. But we're getting close. It's interesting because we get super excited about the matchups the 49ers are going to be playing, what the schedule is going to look like, and then we have to wait a long time for it to happen. 118 days, in fact, until the 49ers kick off against the New York Jets. That's crazy to think, but you're going to have a couple good matchups here. That's only 2 that have been put out there, so it's a lot of fun to see what they're doing. Also released, this according to Matt Barrows, and he is saying that Jeff Duncan, who's with the New Orleans Saints, has said the 49ers and Saints are going to hold joint practices in Irvine ahead of their preseason game. So it's thought that the 49ers are going to play the New Orleans Saints in week 2 of the preseason. And between that time, they're going to have joint practices with the New Orleans Saints. And so we've seen the 49ers hold joint practice with the Chargers, with the Broncos. Now it's going to be the Saints. And why is that significant? Well, Kyle Shanahan values joint practices and the work that he gets out of those joint practices more than he does the preseason games. Your results and how you play in joint practices go a longer way in how they're determining if you're going to make this roster or not than preseason games. But he learns a lot because you're able to fluidly figure out exactly what kind of looks you want to have. In the preseason games, you can't always determine what you want, certain situations you want. It doesn't happen organically. And so those situations you have in those joint practices are huge. So joint practices are always fun. Sometimes they're open to the public, sometimes they're not. If they are open to the public, I'm sure we're going to get a lot of people that are going to go down there. A lot of content creators and reporters will be there to let us know what's going on. And it'll just be another fun time to see how Kyle Shanahan and this 49ers roster handles going against a New Orleans Saints team that has some pretty good corners. So we'll get to hear about Ricky Pearsall going against, Lattimore, Paulson Adebo, some good players over there. It'll also be Isaac Yedem playing his former team. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And that's more news coming out. And Matt Barrows is the one that was all over that. Now, a little bit of front office news. This came out from Jeremy Fowler. And Jeremy Fowler reports that the 49ers are promoting national scout Josh Williams to director of scouting and football operations. He will work closely with general manager Don Lynch, EVP of football operations Parag Marathi, and Williams has been part of the NFL's accelerator program and is considered a future GM candidate. So we know the 49ers had a lot of guys like Tariq Ahmad that they really valued within the organization. And this is another one that they truly value. And Josh Williams, he's a guy that's going to be moving up in this organization. And you heard from Jeremy Fowler, many around the league believe he's going to be eventual GM. The 49ers have done a lot at helping not only guys who used to be GMs or used to be front office personnel come in and they get general manager jobs, but also guys who are rising up the ranks and potentially going to take that next step. But you just look around the league. You have Adam Peters, you have Martin Mayhew, you have Rand Carthon. Those are talented guys just in the last few years that have went out and got GM jobs. And now you've got guys rising up within your ranks that are probably going to be gone at some point. But 49ers doing it again here with Josh Williams. So that's a front office move that's happening for the San Francisco 49ers. So, I mean, we've got signings, we've got releases, we had schedule news. It was a fun day in 49er land. Chris Hubbard, I'm sure we're going to do more breakdowns of Chris Hubbard and Camille Brown. It's going to be a lot of fun to see how these guys transition into what the 49ers want and what the commentary is on what they expect from Hubbard. The belief is going to be he probably slides in behind Colt McKivitz at right tackle, maybe get some left tackle reps as well, because you want to see if he can play that swing tackle role, which he did for many years in his career. So it's a versatile piece, a lot like we talked about Feliciano, center, guard snaps. Now Hubbard, he's got tackle snaps on each side. And then you have all those rookies that you brought in that are going to help your football team as well. You brought in a lot of guys to play on the interior. You didn't have a lot of tackles on your football team, but now legit tackles, you have 5. Trent Williams, Jalen Moore, Colton McKivitz, Chris Hubbard, Brandon Parker, and then you have some guys that are adjustable. Spencer Burford potentially could play tackle if you needed him to. Maybe Ben Barch or Nick Shakel. Those are going to be more guys to watch, which means training camp is going to be a lot of fun. So it's good to see the 49ers continue to add to their roster. Yes, these guys are maybe not the big-time signings that we're looking for, but maybe they can have dividends when you get to the season. But they're going to have to go out and they're going to have to produce in training camp, produce in practice. And if not, the 49ers will be looking for other guys to take your spot, because when you're going through OTAs, I know that they're, it's off-season training. I get it. You're still being evaluated. And there are more players around this league. They're not in a on a team or on a roster, and there's players within the UFL that are not on a team and not on a roster, and they are going to be looking for places to land. And if you're not developing, if you're not putting forth your best effort, the 49ers might look to replace you. And why do I believe that? Ernest Brown didn't even make it to 49ers offseason workouts. Corey Luciano, who they seen for an entire year, he didn't even make it to offseason workouts because guys came in and they showed him what's up. So it's always a risk at this time of the year. If you're not playing your best, if you haven't developed your body the best, there could be somebody ready to come in and take your job, even on a 90-man roster spot, which could mean your spot on the practice squad. Luciano was with the team all last year. So very interesting stuff. I can't wait for the schedule tomorrow. Of course, join me for the Red and Bold Show with Mark Adams of 49ers Camelot. It's always a lot of fun. Come through and check that out. Like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. 49ers Cutback on Believe. It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast. This episode was brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. And remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.